Welcome to Season 2 of Simply Thriving in the North with your co-host, Auroara Leigh, and co-host, Brent Goerz. So for this opening season, we wanted to do 2 episodes where we introduce ourselves to you as the audience and, you know, the work that we're trying to accomplish here with the show and also just in Prince George and beyond. So today's episode will be discussing with Brent Goerz, trauma therapist and social worker here in Prince George. Welcome, Brent.
Thank you. I was quite excited when we were kind of talking about this idea because, you know, we've had the opportunity to kind of have other people sitting in this chair and hearing their story and their context as far as where they've come from and kind of some of the struggles that they've worked through and getting to the point of resiliency. And it's just like, we too have our kind of backstory. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes I get from the work that I do with people, this idea that this perception of that I've got everything together. And the reality is, you know, there's times that I'm just struggling to kind of keep my head above the water. Mm-hmm. And like I remember in particular one person I was working with, and he was just gobsmacked when I talked about my therapist. Like I just said, you know, with my therapist, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you have a therapist? And it's like, yeah, like I need somebody to go to kind of unpack with. And so I was kind of reflecting on a little bit of my journey. And, you know, I know that I don't want to get too caught up in all the details, but, you know, I think I wanted to kind of start with, my background was raised as a strong Christian background. And so some of the kind of anchors or reference points or language I'll use in telling my personal story may have that piece. When I'm working with somebody, you know, one of the big pieces that I try to find out is what's their worldview, because I will use their language in understanding their worldview. And I'm not apologetic for kind of how I was raised and then how my belief system kind of evolved over my life and my experiences. And so, yeah, I wanted to kind of start in early 2015. And at the end of 2015, I realized that it was my year of Job. And for those people who aren't familiar with the story of Job, is where God was testing Job. And, you know, the devil was kind of saying, well, sure, you know, Job follows you because you give him everything. And not that I kind of believe that kind of literal narrative that God was testing me, it was just life circumstances. And so early in January, or early in the year, late January, my house burnt down. And I, you know, basically lost 80% of my stuff. I still had some stuff in some outbuildings and things. And my executive functioning, my thinking brain, kind of went to, oh, okay, well, I've got to kind of do a gratitude thing. I've got to recognize all the stuff that I have in my life. And it's almost like I jumped over that grief piece. And, you know, there was this little niggling things that kept kind of coming up for me that I just kind of kept pushing aside, right? One thing that seems insignificant was my book collection, right? So I would kind of be reminded of a book and say, oh yeah, I have that book. No. You know, and it was just kind of death by 1,000 cuts. And the other thing is I had a personal relationship with my house. I milled most of the wood by hand with a chainsaw mill. And so I could tell where every piece of wood came from.
Wow.
And, you know, some of the pieces I spent an hour and a half with each individual, you know, kind of post or beam. And so it was this connection in a different way than just a place. And it was, my home wasn't an investment. My home was a home. And it was very intentional as far as how it was created. so yeah, that was really impactful. And we did actually have my close friends and extended family. We did kind of have a grief ceremony. You know, we burned some of the timbers that hadn't been burnt, and my dad had shared some stuff about his history of coming to this country. You know, as a young, well, he was a child, and coming from trauma and not having anything. And that was the big thing that I realized, you know, is my grandfather had a grade 8 education. And it's like, I've got a fantastic job, I have benefits, you know, I've got my health, like these are all the things that I kind of acknowledged. And so it's like, I can rebound, I can kind of move forward. And then I continued on with the year, and then September 3rd, there was a knock on my door, 11 o'clock at night. And I looked out the window, and I immediately knew what. In the business, we call it an NOK, a notification of kin. I just didn't know who. So I went to the door and opened up the door. And, you know, this victim services worker, elderly lady, and this cop, you know, I brought them in. And as soon as they kind of said it was my oldest son, I was surprised. I was actually thinking it was another family member who had been kind of sick. And I kind of jumped between shock and logical thought, like executive thinking. And one of the bizarre things, or that some people might think would be bizarre, is this reflection, and this was probably within minutes of getting the news, of how this would deepen my grief therapy and connection with other people. Like it was almost like that light at the end of the tunnel. Like when you work through this, you're going to have a different anchor when you're connecting to people who've kind of lost something very, very close to them. And it didn't make things better. You know, I still kind of went into this chaotic things that need to happen, right? They say it's like planning a wedding in 2 weeks. And so the gift that I had been given is I was a hospital social worker, or I had been a hospital social worker for almost 15 years up until that time. And so I had worked with a lot of people around the act of caring and for a deceased person. And it was actually the Indigenous communities that I had worked with who did things the old way, quote unquote, right? The traditional way, where as a hospital social worker, I worked evenings and weekends. And so I would, you know, go down to the transport area and unload a box, a coffin, a casket, whatever you want to call it, and help, you know, a family release the body, or be in the morgue and assist kind of the two individuals wash and dress the body, those kind of things. So I had lots of really unique, honoring situations where I was kind of present to those kind of situations, and really felt that, you know, this was part of my calling, that, you know, a lot of people wouldn't be able to do that type of work. And so then when my son died, it's like, it was not like I was frozen. It's not like I was stuck. It's not like, what do I do now? Like I had too many things to do. And so it was trying to figure out, what do I delegate and what do I do kind of myself. You
channeled grief into action and meaning.
Well, we know that trauma sticks when we feel helpless. And so if you're doing, and sometimes it doesn't even matter what you're doing, it's still movement, right? When we think about those situations on a cellular level, and our systems getting flooded with chemicals, you know, and we've basically got the 4 F's fight, flight. And if we can't fight or flight, we either freeze or we fawn. And so I knew that, you know, even though I had like little periodic experiences of those 4 F's, it was always, no, what's the next thing to do? What's the next thing to do?
So you talked about bypassing when your house burnt down to gratitude right away, then realizing you still needed to do that deeper work. Was that also a little bit there when your son died?
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, again, most of this stuff you realize in hindsight. And it's that executive thinking. It's like, I have the knowledge. I've read the books. I know the steps that needs to happen. And not the integration, right? And so we kind of talk ourselves out of the work. And
especially when you know what's going on. It's like if a neuroscientist had a seizure and they're actually conscious and know what parts of the brain are firing and why. When you're a trauma therapist or a grief counselor and you can witness and observe it, it doesn't stop it from happening. You're just still able to calculate, understand, but also make some decisions because you know, like you said, if you freeze and get stuck, that's when you'll get more stuck in the grief. It'll take longer to heal.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing that happens is, I mean, I work with a very diverse group of people. Many of the professionals that I work with, and the ones that I have connection with or feel like I've got a connection with, I'm fairly blunt. And I said, you know, the interesting thing is, you know, you're in front of me right now like a severed head. You think you can solve all the problems by what's sitting on your shoulders. And here's the challenge. Your body now is communicating. Your emotions are communicating. And you haven't figured out a way of listening and connecting and integrating. And so that's what we're going to be working on with regards to the work ahead of us. And I'm here to just make suggestions. You're going to do all the hard work. And I guess it was my ego that really didn't have me reach out to somebody professionally right at the beginning. Even though in hindsight, it's like dumbass Brent, like, what are you doing? And it wasn't until things totally fell apart that you could kind of go back and say, that's when I really needed a professional. I had a fantastic support network. I had an amazing family. I knew kind of the initial pieces that needed to happen with regards to the ritual pieces around grief. I also didn't have any preconceptions that this was just going to be this short little journey. Although I didn't give myself enough time away from work because, you know, I'm still working kind of in the emergency department of Emerge. I'm still working with the families where I was just on the other side of the curtain a few months previously, right? So I took a little bit of time off of work, but not enough. And I think that's sometimes what happens when you're a helper, right? Because we know that fills our tank, helping others.
Yeah. In the modern world, right? I think that in cultures throughout time, there's always been like a grief ritual that's understood where that person takes that time for self-care in their own processes depending on the culture.
Absolutely. And that's the fascinating thing that started to become unfolding to me, right? I knew that it was going to be significant at the time to have direct connection with my son's body, to kind of come to that reality. And, you know, and so because of my connections, right, that was facilitated. His body was in a morgue in Calgary. So I chose to transport him back to Prince George. It was covered by ICBC. It wasn't a cost thing. It was he needs to be with family, right? And so he needs a transport container. Well, that transport container, I've been making Simple Pine boxes at that time for over 8 years, right? So I called it my redneck tull. It was a coffin that was actually on the roof rack of my Subaru. And
I remember when
in
we
hindsight,
first met, you told me this. And
it's a little crazy.
Wow.
But nobody would actually say like that there's somebody in there.
Right.
And again, in time, you can kind of see some of the humor and also some of the craziness of some of those initial decisions. But because I knew what I wanted, you know, that it was really, really difficult to steer me externally. It was, if I needed help, I would reach out to kind of my team and say, I need your help, I need some direction, I don't know what to do here, right? So one of the things is my son ended up having 2 funerals or a celebration of life and a funeral. Probably that's kind of how it would be designed, right? So there was this Pineview Hall celebration of life where his body wasn't present. And then there was a funeral which had some of the more aspects of a funeral where his body was present in a side room. People could have a viewing should they so choose, right? And so it was more of the kind of traditional settler kind of concept of a funeral. And then he, and actually prior to that, he had been at a wake in the sense of, you know, he was at home in a cabin for a few days while he was able to kind of, while his friends were able to kind of connect with him in a more natural kind of setting. And that was something that I knew was important, not only for me, but I wanted to provide that opportunity for those around because I had seen that significance of that transformation. You know, I call it participatory grief, when you engage directly in the storm, as opposed to, here's a check, do everything, make it go away, right? And that's kind of sometimes where a person's so overwhelmed, right? They can't think of doing. And so that's where you just, you know, you go to the funeral home and you contract for services. And you don't recognize that you can actually do 95% of those kind of things.
In those sudden losses situations, you know, you can spring to action, but then there's always when everything's done and settled, now you've taken care of everything.
Yeah.
Because sometimes a person's trauma response from long before, maybe adapted from childhood, is to do that like fight, flight, like I got to gather all the pieces to feel in control of this situation, right? And then all of a sudden, well, now everyone, it's a couple months, people aren't calling, they're not stopping by, right? Then you're really sitting with what is.
Right. It's interesting you say that with regards to people's own narrative. Like, the fascinating thing is I grew up very naive. I grew up in a very supportive, WASP type of rural farm community, right? Where we kind of understood community as far as within farming, right? So if somebody, you know, had a heart attack or some kind of medical thing, the other farmers came together and helped, you know, kind of get off the crop. And it was that real sense of connection. And later on in my trauma work, I came across the ACEs score, the Adverse Childhood Experience score. And obviously you kind of do it on yourself, right? And initially it was 0. And it's like, oh, okay. You know, and so it's like you got to work at it a little bit harder in the sense of developing that same connection, right? So I don't have that backstory. But what I did realize over time, I did start scoring myself as a 0.5. And the reason being, we understand epigenetics with regards to the symptoms of trauma getting passed on generationally. And so on my dad's side of the family, there was a symptom of depression as a result of trauma. And I was only one generation away from pretty substantive trauma of disconnection, you know, and that was kind of back to that thread of the gratefulness when I lost my house in the sense of I've got a university education and a job and health and all of that. This didn't exist a generation ago, right, where they're kind of subsistence farming.
Right. But there would have been some symptomology from his depression that would have impacted you, and that's the intergenerational piece.
Absolutely. And, you know, again, it's unprocessed, right? So whether that's conscious in my father's generation, right, I can look back on my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, and fortunately I've got some relatives who are social workers. So we can kind of have conversations about going backwards, right? And our different perspectives on who a person is. Because my perspective of who my grandmother was very different than my one aunt's perspective, who was the caregiver for her mother. And so she was the one that, you know, my grandmother was very, very negative, you know, and she was the buffer kind of for the rest of the family, and had to kind of endure that piece that grandma couldn't share, you know, because we don't air our dirty laundry.
It's a big belief system that passes, right?
Or we push down any significant kind of symptoms of trauma or negative experiences that we have.
I believe a lot of people carry that from that the families taught that and continued it on. And I also believe that that's a lot of why North America is so sick. Because it's suppressing it down. And when you talk about that mind-body connection, not knowing even how to feel and process from the body, because the body is going to tell you.
Yeah.
And then people will do all kinds of things to not feel that sensation, but to sit with sensations in the body. And people can find folks like you that are doing that work in the area if they feel like they realize they've been suppressing for a long time, hey?
Yeah.
There's a lot of folks in Prince George that do that work?
There is, for sure. And it's interesting because people self-select with regards to who they're going to connect to, right? So I constantly, if it's not a referral through a friend or, you know, through a former client or whatever, right, I ask a person, you know, why me? And I mean, I can do the Google Analytics with regards to the 3 top search terms that come to me, right? And so it's counselors Prince George, couples counselors Prince George, because I do couples now, and anger management Prince George.
You come up for that? That's great.
Yeah, so I'm the guy's guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, okay.
And so part of...
well, speaking of that, like you started the New Beginnings Men's Shed.
Yes.
And so I know that the Pine Box kind of really connected you to starting that, right? So
That was a piece of it, and actually it was my recovery journey. So when I realized, a couple years later, my life kind of came crashing to a halt. And so I was kind of on autopilot. You know, a lot of the work that I could do as a hospital social worker was just second nature, right? And it was honoring, right? It was enjoyable, you know, and back to the kind of filling my tank, right? But what I didn't realize, and I think in metaphors, right? And so really, within kind of a northern context, you've got your tidy tank, with your fuel, and then you've got your fuel tank. As a trauma therapist and as a helper, we should be feeding people from our tidy tank. We shouldn't be siphoning out of our tank that actually powers our vehicle. And that's what I was doing.
So you got burnt out.
Yeah. Well, there was nothing left. I mean, burnt out is one expression, but as I was kind of in my recovery journey, one of the really fascinating things is when you look at the medical system and how they kind of understand and categorize and treat issues, is the 4 main things that I was dealing with didn't exist in the DSM, the Diagnostical Statistical Manual, right? Burnout, vicarious trauma, so witnessing trauma, other people experiencing trauma, cumulative trauma, right? Death by 1,000 cuts, and compassion fatigue.
Yeah.
Those caring, opening your heart to people, and again and again and again, to the point where you're depleted, right? And so when you have to submit to the system to kind of recover, I was fortunate that I could be an active part of the system. Right? I could kind of say to my family doctor when it came to the individuals that I saw, this is who I want to see, or this is who I didn't want to see. Because at the beginning, part of my journey, my ego was slammed. The shame of kind of letting myself get to that point was just overwhelming. And
because of the title and role you held in
absolutely,
like
I'm helping others.
Yeah.
I can't help myself. So literally, I did, in hindsight, what I call 3 months of couch therapy. Nothing. I did nothing. But I remind people when I'm working with them on their recovery journey, doing nothing is actually doing something when there's no tank, when there's no fuel in your tank, right? And again, so even that burnout, all-encompassing term, if that's what we call it, even that burnout gave me skills down the road. But the first thing I needed to do is I needed to help myself. So I needed my mental health person, as far as a counselor, a psychiatrist, all that disability management system, everything else at work, and I had to work through the system. And fortunately, I had a team lead and a chaplain who actually noticed kind of me spiraling. And they were the ones who did an intervention and tagged me out and said, you know, Brent, you need to take some time. And we're not talking about just a few weeks.
And with that belief system that you talked about suppression that's passed down from your grandmother, that would be really hard to hear because of, like you said, pride. So if the ego wasn't in the way, you might have noticed that before.
Yeah.
But that belief system of, well, then I'm not good enough, I'm not being that productive citizen, or whatever else the narrative is.
That's it.
Yeah.
Productivity. At the end of the day, what have you done? What have you accomplished? Right? When you're in the helping field, it's like, well, I helped this, this, and this. When you work in some fields, it's like measuring by planting seeds because you don't see the outcome, right? And essentially, you have to do your own work.
Isn't that being a role model of the work, though, anyways? Because you're representing the wellness that is so required when a crisis happens or when life happens.
Absolutely, and that's the fascinating thing. Like the difference between my undergraduate social work degree and my master's is in my master's, my undergraduate, it's like you don't personally disclose. You keep your situation separate from your clients. You only have one role, right? And it's like, how do you work in a place like Prince George or in even a smaller community and just like what happens if you see people at the grocery store? What happens if, they're the friend of your hairdresser? Whatever, like there's all these multiple situations and it's this clinical disconnect with regards to your professional face, and it's just like, I'm not a human being. So as I continued on my journey and as I continued, I got my master's degree in '99, so I had that information, but then integrating that with when to disclose, right? Because there was many people after my significant events who came to me as a result of, they knew I lost a son. Yeah. So they chose me as a result of that, right? Yeah. And I was very honored.
Because now you're human too.
Yeah. The challenge, though, is they said, well, what did you do here? Or what did you do here? And it's not a prescriptive situation where it's like my journey was different. Like I can tell you that the wind was blown out of my sails and I just needed to kind of take some time and that I didn't, I made this mistake and this mistake and this mistake. And I can tell you that to this day, I have good days and bad days, right? And I have to remind myself kind of those ingredients of what creates that balance for me.
Yeah. So humility towards yourself is probably one of the key things that
Humility, doing the work, constantly being aware of that integration piece, creating safety in your body, and that then flows to your executive functioning that allows you to do the work, to do the connection. Because if you just allow the ego and kind of all the to-dos and all the literature and, do this in this situation. It's like people get that really quick in the sense of they don't have that connection.
Well, and we need to restore some of that human connection piece. I think that the Western model really took out. And so I know that you use story a lot to ground and connect with people. That's why you've, created such a community at the Men's Shed and of people that trust you through your storytelling.
Absolutely. And yeah, just to kind of end there. So in my journey back home into my space, I realized I needed a therapist. And I knew everyone in Prince George. I'd worked with them or I'd trained them, or, and don't take any offense for people who are listening, they're 12 years old, meaning they didn't have a decade of experience who could actually deal with my crap, right? I think Brene Brown says, there's therapists and then there's therapists.
Yeah.
People tell me I needed one of those, right? And I was in the same boat. And so fortunately, the love of my life found a therapist, but it was in Vanderhoof. And so I was commuting to Vanderhoof and I went, hey, they got a Men's Shed here. And so it ended up being almost like a half a day experience where, I kind of got ready to kind of connect with my therapist. Then I grounded myself with a bunch of guys and then I went back. And so it actually kind of created that balance. And so then I went, well, why doesn't Prince George have one of these, right? And you start networking and having communication. And so I've been a part of kind of 2 sheds. And, with the one that I was kind of a founding member of, it's just like, okay, this is my vision, but it's not just about me. I need to kind of gather like-minded individuals. And for the most part, all of our leadership team, or hosts or whatever we call us, because it's not a hierarchical structure, we all have a backstory. We all have a backpack, and if somebody comes to the shed and is trying to force me to put my therapy hat on, it's just like, whoa, no. Yeah. I'm here for me. Yeah. I'm hosting today. I'll pour you a cup of coffee. Yeah. We can kind of hang out, right? But I'm not looking to kind of create business by hanging out with a lot of, messed up guys. And then that's not how it works. Like, this is part of that recovery journey.
Yeah. Yeah. You're walking your talk.
Yeah.
And being part of it, and it's for you, and you gather like-minded folks. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I just really honor you coming on and sharing today about, who you are and what your story is. And is there a bit more you want to share about the Men's Shed, or encourage people or in the area that might be listening to? What would you encourage for them?
I don't know when this episode's coming up. I'm hoping it's coming up soon. We are having an organization approached us about doing a fundraiser for Movember.
Okay.
And so there is an event that's happening on the 23rd of November that's going to be a fundraising event for the shed. And the caveat is it's going to be an alcohol event at a club, and so we understand a lot of folks that's not their kind of works for them. And actually even a lot of our guys who are at the shed who've got PTSD and anxiety, and that's not a situation that kind of feels comfortable. But we were hoping by utilizing a whole different demographic, because our shed isn't limited to guys with, gray beards. It's younger people, and we want it to be diverse. And so, we're really looking forward to that event on the 23rd. And it's on our Facebook page, New Beginnings Men's Shed, and we have a web page as well. And we're looking forward to an interesting event there. And our shed is open Wednesdays from 3:30 to 5:30 every Wednesday. I'm the host. And then my buddy Cliff, who's got a great backstory, he opens it after he goes to the farmer's market, usually about 11 o'clock till 2 in the afternoon. So it's probably almost going to be opening shortly because we're shooting this on a Saturday.
Right. Yeah. So what can people expect if they show up at the shed? What they're kind of doing?
It's a safe place to hang out. You know, one of the sayings is shoulder to shoulder. So it's kind of like when you have a teenager, and this is way too intense to try to kind of deal with an issue with your teenager, right? But if you're doing windshield therapy, like it's dark out and you're kind of in your vehicle and you're driving, right? You're just shoulder to shoulder and you're just kind of hanging out. And you're going from point A to point B. So we do a lot of kind of woodworking-ish kind of things. Yeah. We're working on a resin river pour boardroom table right now, which is going to be spectacular, hopefully. I'm a wood butcher. Or that's how I refer to myself. The British call it a wood butcher, so I'm depending on people who know a lot more about woodworking than me in that project. We've got lots of other smaller projects, some community projects that we do, and it's not about production. Like there's times that we'll just go and we'll sit and we'll have coffee, you know, especially if somebody's just has come to the first time, which is kind of why we call it host. You know, there's always kind of one person who's there to meet anyone new, and it's just drop by, just come. And our address and the map, Google Maps, is kind of on our website. Okay. And just come on out and check us out.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
And so, just a last question: what do you hope for, accomplishing with working with others with the show? You know, with having guests on or sharing messages through the show's content. What is your hope for Simply Thriving in the North?
I've spent my entire professional career in the North. I have a passion, sometimes I say it's central BC. It's not really the North, but it's like in this area, with integrating blue-collared individuals and professionals, and kind of it's this beautiful mix of community. And so I really had a vision of, when you approached me and we started kind of brainstorming, just hearing from people's journey. And I always tell people I learn more from my clients than I think they learn from me, because I'm always kind of turning it back onto them with regards to, no, this is your journey. You're the captain of your ship, right? I can stand here and be kind of your first mate and make suggestions, but you're doing the work. And so in the same way, it's like many of the guests for season 1, like I had no idea of who they were, or I kind of knew about them, their persona in the community, but then it's just like never had the opportunity to kind of drill into it as far as, well, how did you get here? Like we know that, you've got this profile, you do this work and it's spectacular, but where did this come from?
So story and community building.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks for sharing so willingly. It's great to
my pleasure.
Introduce one of the co-hosts so the audience know who the heck's sitting in these chairs.
Yeah, we definitely don't have all our ducks in a row, so we want to be honest.
Thank you for tuning in to Season 2, Episode 1 of Simply Thriving in the North.
So we just came from the studio. We were talking about the men's shed. I wanted to bridge it so that you actually know what it means to kind of come to the men's shed. We drink coffee, or you come in, and it's whenever between the hours that we're open, just casual drop in, and you might see kind of 3 or 4 different stations going off and working on different projects. Gail, do you want to say what you're working on?
Basically, what we're doing is reconditioning the store, at least this side of the door.
Yeah.
The customer actually brought it in, wanted it, the actual wax coating removed, so we removed it. So now I'm in probably the final stages of sanding it and getting it ready to give back to the customer.
Fantastic. Now, Cliff, what are you doing? Are you fixing stuff?
Always fixing stuff.
Yeah? Cliff is our host for Saturdays.
Hi, guys.
And he's got his own backstory with regards to kind of what's brought him to the shed. Did you want to share kind of what the shed means to you?
It's a nice place to come and relax and not have to stress. If I want to do something, I want to make a project, somebody's always working on something. And if I just want to sit and have a coffee because I'm not feeling really great, nobody gives me a hard time about it. that's why I come.
Yeah. I'm curious, you've said to me before, Cliff, sometimes this is your kind of big social event of the week where you actually have to people.
I go to the market in the morning. I love the market, and then I come here and open up the shed, and it's my Saturday. It's my peace time.
Your routine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you need to tag out, you just talk to one of the other leadership team and say, gotta go early, or I'm done peopling today.
Al's really good for that too.
Yeah, for sure.
Just give him a call and say, look, I'm not feeling great. Are you going to be into the shed? Yeah, not a problem.
Yeah,
That's how we work.
for sure.
Cliff was motivated this morning to get in though.
Oh yeah, all the pallets that are in the back of my truck.
It's your story.
I love that. I needed pallets for a wood shed at home, and our procurement officer over there found me some awesome pallets.
Yeah, he got a pickup load of 12-foot pallets this morning of 1x6s.
And it's like the full distance, like you've got the 12 feet of...
12 feet of lumber on. I think there's 8 pallets there, is there, Cliff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And so
amazing.
one of the spots was loaded up, and I got in touch with Cliff early this morning and said, got a use for these? And the answer was yes. So they're on my truck, and now they're on his truck.
So many people may know Don as a former principal, if you've ended up in his office, but that you must be pretty old then.
Yes, I am.
Or, no, I'm saying the person who ended up in your office is old, you're even older.
And I've got students in town that are well in their 60s.
Or former city councilor, and he's been one of the best additions to our shed because he kind of always has 2 or 3 things brewing in his head as far as things that we can do. And if you come and hang out at the shed, it's possible, and it doesn't happen right away, it might take a few months, that Don may share with you where to collect a pallet, where to fish a nice hole that you have to walk into that most people don't know about, or whether you can kind of find an amazing gathering of berries.
Yeah, there's a few of those things out there. Yeah, and we might even have fun showing people how to do these.
Oh yeah, this is our Christmas tree project that we're doing. Are these the ones for Rainbow Day Center?
No, they're finished.
They're finished. They're for.
No, this is Don playing around to see.
This is Don playing around.
Because there's a fundraiser happening, and Don's going to try to, on behalf of the shed, have 3, 4 somethings like that to do.
Okay, so that's the silent auction that's happening on November 23rd at the Underground Club. A lot of our guys probably won't make it just because it's kind of alcohol focused, but or might not be sensory appropriate for those folks who have their PTSD symptoms right under the surface. But that being said, I mean, we all have a backstory. And, you know, the viewers had an opportunity to hear some of my backstory today. And I just wanted to kind of bridge the positive connection that happens when, you know, men come together and work shoulder to shoulder. One of the projects we wanted to talk about here is, this is my long-term project. I thought it was going to be a short-term project, but we started it, 4-5 months ago?
Yes.
When AWAC, the Association for Women in Communities, who sponsored and provides kind of the umbrella non-for-profit number for our organization, needed a boardroom table. And so I said, hey, they're really expensive. How about the men's shed builds one for you? So I went out, sourced some lumber, and found these beautiful fir slabs. So this is the bottom of it that we've sanded a little bit, but we're gonna lift with our knees. We're gonna put it down, and we're gonna show you a little bit about, we still have to obviously finish the edges here, and we're gonna create a resin river pour. So we're gonna take the bark off here. This is Douglas fir. We're gonna put the bark ends together, and then we're gonna box it, and then pour resin within it that's colored.
Yeah.
Did you want to add anything?
It's gonna basically, the board table is gonna have a breadboard edge to it, which will actually tie the actual edge of it together so it can't expand or contract. So that gives it a better finished look. because you're not going to see the end grain. You're going to see a nice board along the end.
Right. And so obviously we're taking 2 of these 24-inch wide pieces and putting them together. So it's going to be 4 feet, over 4 feet wide,
Yeah.
and about 10 feet long.
So is this one of the pictures that's being donated for the silent auction?
This is a print that my wife had actually drawn.
Wow.
And we actually went to, the story behind it, we actually went to Stewart, Alaska, and we actually took a picture of the bear doing this. And it was fishing, and when it was fishing, it would actually reach down, grab a fish. If it struggled too much, it'd let it go, and then grab another one. So that's why it's called Gone Fishing. And then I've actually created the actual cedar frame for it.
It's beautiful. So that'll be at the fundraising event.
That's going to be at the silent auction, yes.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And is there another item you wanted to share?
Yeah. So this one is an actual birch bowl off my own property. I live in town here. And this is called what they call spalding in it. This white staining in it, can you see it? That's called spalding. That's a fungus that attacks the tree.
Okay.
And what it does is that you can never get the same design. You'll never see another one exactly like this.
So that'll also be at the fundraiser.
So that's also going to be at the fundraiser.
Okay. Great. And you made that here at the
Yes,
shed?
not at the shed. I made it at home.
Okay.
But I made it for the shed.
Nice. Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. So you've been coming since it started. You're a founder of it, right?
Yeah, for this particular shed, yes. I found that some of the others weren't as inclusive as what I'd like. So I met Brent. He was pretty much the first guy, and everything was pretty quiet and welcoming. And the big part, respect. Everybody got respect. It didn't matter what your political status was, anything like that. Everybody showed respect. So I got involved.
Nice.
Yeah.
Coming in on mutual ground, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And like I said, we have a diverse amount of people.
Wow. How many now?
I think we're, what are we, about 50 or 60?
Wow.
I think, yeah. That we've had come in and sign up. Whether they come on a regular basis or not, doesn't matter.
Right.
We're here for them when they need us.
Yeah.
Or when we need us.
There's a big impact just in knowing it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We used to have, clubhouses or you stop in at the local pub and have a drink with your buddies. There's not a whole lot of that going on anymore. So for a guy to find a place where like-minded people are, it's difficult.
Yeah.
And that's why it's really nice. We should have a shed on as many sheds in town as we do McDonald's.
Yeah.
And we're hoping to get there.
Wow.
Yeah.
How have you seen it evolve since it started?
Wow. Well, for the shed in Prince George, the evolve on that was we didn't even have really a building. We were at the what is it, the art space or whatever on Victoria.
Yeah.
And that's great to sit and chat, but to do a project, we couldn't do that. So when this space became available, it was a godsend.
Yeah.
Because we're right at the wood shop for the city, what used to be.
Okay.
So it has all the amenities that we need. It's in a quiet area. Yeah. The owners are fantastic. And it's central for us.
And so you've seen it grow as well. And what about, when people say, hey, what's a men's shed? Do you get that a little less? Like people already know kind of?
A lot of people have looked into it.
Okay.
We'd like more,
Yeah.
but we've done a lot of things, a lot of different projects for the community, and that's gotten us a bit of a reputation. So
Yes.
that's kind of nice too.
Okay.
It's nice having people look to us for help. Sometimes we can do it, sometimes we can't. All of us have issues, like Brent likes to say, backstories. Mine, I was Canadian Armed Forces. I was underage. My dad had to sign for me. In fact, he almost ran and broke his arm getting a pen to sign me up. And then I got PTSD. And that's a unique issue to deal with.
Yeah, and the world didn't know that much about it until more recently.
They used to call it shell shock, or that you were malingering, or you know. I'm glad that they've become a lot more enlightened.
Yeah. What does this place serve for you in your life now? Like, how do you feel?
Gives me a focus. Gives me a place to belong. Like I said, when you're Canadian Armed Forces, you have a band of brothers, more or less. And when you retire from either the military or civilian life, you mostly lose that. It's hard for a guy to make friends.
Yeah.
Once you're retired. So this shed gives us that perfect opportunity.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you're, sharing about that, where someone could be watching and think, hey, maybe I'll start going.
And everybody's welcome.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who you are. As long as you show respect for everybody else, you're more than welcome.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like a diverse group of people, because you get amazing stories.
Yeah.
And I'm all about stories. I like that.
Well, thanks for sharing a bit of yours today, and thank you for your contributions, to the community.
Oh no, you're welcome. I also teach wilderness survival.
Oh yeah?
Wild Man North survival training.
Okay.
And most of my clientele are female.
Okay.
Particularly nurses at the hospital.
Okay.
I've taught a bunch of them because they don't mind paying to learn. They're smart. Guys, oh, well, my dad took me hunting. I know all about how to be in the bush. And they're the ones that get lost, or,
That's one of the big key things about being here, right? Is that transference of knowledge that takes place.
And we do that a lot. Dawn has done a gardening program where we have not just us, but people in the community come in and learn. I teach wilderness survival. We have a guy who does fly tying. I do that as well. So we have little, info sessions or little training sessions, which is a lot of fun too.
Nice, that's really great. I mean, the possibilities are endless, and at the end of the day, I think you come in each day kind of being project focused, right? And then also being open to what else.
Well, talking to people. That's probably one of the I like doing woodwork and stuff, but I really like talking to people and helping them, right? I'm not a therapist or anything else like that. I'm just a guy who's been through a ton of crap.
Yeah.
I got 55 surgical procedures under my belt already.
Wow.
Right? So when guys come in and they've had a stroke or they've, busted up their body or have just need to talk.
Yeah.
I can pretty much get there.
Well, someone doesn't need to be professionally trained to bring compassion to a story, compassion to reality, right?
True.
And when you bring compassion,
You just got to care about people.
Yeah. Yeah, I can feel that off of you.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for sharing.
That's very nice of you to say that.
Yeah.
It kind of makes my day.
I'm so glad. It's the little things, right?
Thank you.
That are real. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
See, this is how we talk all the time when we're in the shed. talk about stuff that happens in our lives, talk about how we're feeling, or maybe just help somebody else and then feel better doing that.
Yeah.
That's what's awesome about this place.
Natural, off-the-cuff conversations that are real, because it's about just being authentic in a safe space to do that, right?
Remember, most of us worked in male-dominated areas for a long time, and you become brothers with guys you work with, and then when you retire, that's gone.
Yeah.
Right? So you got to find some other way, and the shed is perfect for that.
Yes. And I know through studying anthropology that actually, because women, we would ancestrally be in a circle together talking and, doing what we needed to do to create, warm clothing and baskets and different things in different cultures. Men, they were out side by side, shoulder to shoulder hunting. And that's where men open up more.
With nonverbal skills.
Yeah.
Right? Because you don't want to scare the game. So instead of talking to each other, you facial recognition stuff, all of that.
Yeah.
Signals.